Good afternoon. My name is Atimanada George, and I'm an Archie Green Fellow with the Library of Congress's American Folk Life Center. And today we have Marva Long as a participant in our discussion of Playing the Angels Game, exploring Black Foreign Service women's perspectives. Marva, thank you for accepting our invitation. Would you begin by telling us your origin story?
Yes, and thank you for reaching out to me to be a part of this. I was born in New Bern, North Carolina on February 8th, 1944. I lived in New Bern until the age of 18 when I left and went away to college in Durham. And it was North Carolina College at that time, but now is called North Carolina Central University. I spent approximately 3 years there. And after leaving college, I moved to Washington, D.C. to live with my sister. And I knew that I had to get a job. So my first employment in Washington, D.C. was at the Hex department store. Some people may not know that, and some may remember it was located at 7th and F Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. And I worked there for approximately maybe a year. And my supervisor, one of my supervisors, just kept encouraging me to seek uh, other employment because I have been blessed to have been in the presence of people who have seen more in me than what I saw in myself. So I took the civil service test and I was hired by the Department of State. And my first job in the Department of State was working in the passport office. And in the passport office, one of my duties was to sort passport applications and then file them away in the respective files. And I stayed in the passport office for a few years, and then I moved to another office within the passport office. And at that time, we were located over on what's that, 8th Street, 17th and 8th Street, Northwest. I know it was 17th, I think it was H. And I ended up returning back to Main State. And I worked in the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs in the Near East and South Asian office. And in that office, the duties were we planned uh, um, schedules for international visitors who would come over from countries. Well, since I was in the Near East and South Asian Bureau, they came from those countries. And we would do their programs for while they were here in the United States. And I got to meet quite a few foreigners. Most of my um, supervisors were Foreign Service officers. And they would talk to me about, why don't you join the Foreign Service? And I didn't know that much about the Foreign Service at that time. But anyway, I knew that I was a single parent and I had no desire to travel long distance with a child at that time because my support system was my family and my friends, and I was afraid to step out. Well, fast forward, my son graduated from high school, and when he graduated from high school, I decided to take that leap of faith. And In 1989, I was at the department with a friend of mine, and we were at a job fair. And I said, Yvonne, I'm going over here to the Foreign Service desk and get an application. And she looked at me and she said, the Foreign Service? And I said, yes. She said, I never heard you talk about the Foreign Service. I said, well, no, I have not. I said, but Adrian has left and I'm all alone. So this is a good time. I think that I should just venture out. So I did. I took the all of the applications and I filled everything out and returned it. And I received a response giving me information on thanking me for the application, and someone would be in touch with me. And then I began to get excited, like, oh, this is really going to take place. And after I was contacted and they started doing the background investigation, I knew then that unless something came up in my background, that I was on the road to becoming a Foreign Service personnel. So everything went smoothly. And on February the 11th, 1990, I was sworn into the United States Foreign Service. My first assignment was to Lagos, Nigeria. And I was I was ecstatic in one way, but then too, I had heard so many negative things about Africa that it made me stop and wonder, now, do you really want to go? But you just signed a document saying that you would serve wherever your services were needed. So, of course, I had to go. And I'll go back. I worked at the Voice of America for a few years. And in working at the Voice of America, I worked with Africans from, I think, all of the regions because I was in the Africa Bureau. And I became close to quite a few of them. So they gave me their viewpoint of their home country, which I was glad to receive because then I could hear something positive instead of everything always being negative. Well, in March of 1990, I arrived on the continent of Africa. I had stopped in Brussels for a few days to spend some time with a friend. And then I left there and the plane stopped in Cotonou, Benin. So that was the first time that I stepped foot on the soil of Africa. And people have asked me, well, how did you feel? And I couldn't really tell them how I felt because deep down inside, I don't know how I felt. So but when we left Benin, we were there for maybe an hour or so, and when we left the fly into Lagos, that was a very short flight. So when I got off the plane in Lagos, I was expecting for somebody to greet me right then and there when I got off the plane because these were the instructions that had been given to me. Someone will meet you. Well, when I got off that flight, I didn't see anybody saying, welcome, Miss Long, or I'm from the embassy. And I said, oh my stars, now what do I do? Here I am, a foreign soul. How do I handle myself? Because I know that I had also heard horror stories about trying to get through the airport in Lagos, Nigeria. Well, anyway, I decided, well, look, you this far, just act like you know what you're doing. And I began to walk towards the sign saying customs and all. I had all my documents in order. And I was standing in line, and all of a sudden, someone said, Miss Long. And I turned around and I said, Yes, I'm so and so, the expediter from the American Embassy. Welcome to Nigeria. Well, this guy didn't know how happy I was to see him because I was just, I said, You can't panic. No, you don't panic. Don't panic. I always tell myself, Don't panic. Act like you know what you're doing, even though you may not know what you were doing. So I gave him all of my documentation to get me through. So while I'm standing there waiting for him to clear me with all of my documentations, another guy comes up and he said, I missed you coming off the plane. And he said, I don't know how you got past me. And I'm saying to myself, how did I get past you? Don't I look like I'm an American? I don't look, you should not have missed me. I'm dressed like an American. And we laughed about it. And I told him, thanks. And then he told me, he said, well, your supervisor is out here to greet you. Now, and this is 11 something at night. And I'm saying to myself, my supervisor came all the way out here to greet me. He must really need a secretary. Because I was happy, and then I was happy that he was there, but then I was kind of perplexed. Well, okay, where does this story go? But anyway, when everything was clear, they took me to my supervisor, and he was standing there, and I had met him in Washington before I had gone out. He was back in Washington on an assignment, and we got to meet. So I knew what he looked like. And so when I saw him, I was happy. And I said, well, thanks for coming out here. But then all of a sudden, I got hot and I started pulling off clothes. And I said, wait a minute, it is hot in this airport. And I realized where I was. So I said, well, stop pulling off your clothes, Marva, because you may pull off too much and they may send you, they may say, this woman is crazy. We're going to send her back to wherever she came from. But anyway, we left the airport. It was two vehicles had come to the airport, one for my luggage and one for me. So he took me to my temporary quarters. And I tell this story because now I'm in a foreign country. I don't know anybody. Even though English is being spoken, as we all know that there are different accents with English. So I'm speaking what I would think the American English, and they're speaking what may be the British English, and trying to communicate. But I was still happy that my supervisor was still with me, so he could do some interpretation for me. I was placed in a temporary housing because where I was going to be staying permanently, it was not ready. Some work was being done to it. And that night, I tell the story. That was a long night because, first of all, the place was cold. I felt like I had walked into a freezer. So I thought about it. I said, well, at least the air condition over here in Africa is working. I hope it continues to work wherever I am in my quarters. And when he left, my supervisor left after my luggage arrived. And I started turning off all of the air conditioners. I said, I'm going to have to fight this out tonight. I cannot freeze. I don't want them to come back here and find a body that's frozen. That's just how cold it was to me. So late on that night, I had gone to the bathroom, and then I heard something singing after I had flushed the commode. And I didn't know whether there was someone else in the apartment whispering. It was like a whispering sound. So as I said, that was a long night. I was glad to see daylight come in and the vehicle coming to pick me up.
Excuse me, before you go on, did you ever solve the mystery of the whispering singing sound?
No, I did not.
Hmm.
Um, and I was trying to remember if the next night I heard it when I returned to the apartment. And this apartment I was on the fourth floor and I was the only person in the building. So of course that gave me some spooky feelings that nobody else is in this building.
But
What
you
is
did
the
have security, though.
no, this at this place, I don't even recall. I'm quite sure there was someone at the gate
Mhm.
because most of the places, well, all of them had security.
Mhm.
But I didn't even think about security. I just thought about if somebody else is in here, I don't know what I'm going to do tonight. But no, I don't recall the whistling sound going on. I may have told somebody when I got the to the embassy, and they probably sent GS General Service officers. They probably sent somebody by to check it out. I want to think that's what happened. But anyway, my job, I worked for the political counselor,
Who was that at the time?
John Campbell.
I thought so. I thought so.
Okay, yes, he was the political counselor at the time. And he was only there a few months because someone else came in. Uh, so my whole 2 years, he was not there. I don't know whether he transferred or he was curtailed. I can't recall now exactly what happened to Mr. Campbell, but he left. But the job was interesting. It was. I enjoyed working with and for him, and there were two other political officers working at the time in there. You may remember Brian Brown.
I do.
Okay. And oh gosh, what was it? Gatto, Donna Gatto.
I don't remember Donna.
I think, yeah, I think that was Donna's last name. So the two of them. And they did the majority of their work, so I didn't have to do too much for them. But in Nigeria, I truly, truly enjoyed myself. I was surprised that I did, but I know the type of person that I am. So I said it was a decision that I had finally made, and you got to live with it, which I did. One one sad part about being in Nigeria, the first Christmas I was not allowed. I didn't, as they say, I couldn't go home for leave. And I had never been away from my family for Christmas. So I cried from sun up to sundown because I was just out of it. I could not believe that here I am in a foreign country without any family, biological family. But as we know, the people you meet, we all become family. But at that time, most of them had gone to someplace else if they didn't go back to their hometown in the States. Some of them went other places like for vacation, the ones who I had palled around with. So I'm saying, oh my gosh. But I got through because I was invited to the deputy chief of mission residence for Christmas. And I did go. I hesitated, but my supervisor at that time, he said, he invited me and he said, "Do you want um, him and his wife to come and get me?" And I said, "No, I can drive there because I was living on Ecoy Island and the DCM's residence wasn't too far from where I was living." So I told him, "No, I'm coming, I'm coming." And I think he thought, "She's not coming," but I was glad that I did go. I did. I went, and I enjoyed the fellowship that we had there.
Miss Long,
Uh,
would you tell us a little bit about the nature of the work that you did? You mentioned that two of the officers were fairly self-sufficient. So what did you find yourself doing?
I my main duties were to keep the political counselor schedule in order, make sure that he got to his meetings on time, to arrange meetings for him, to do some typing because at that time we were typing. So I was, as you would say, his controller, his administrative assistant, because I did most of his work. Whereas with the other two officers, I was available to help them when they needed help. So, did that answer?
Yes,
Uh,
thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So, after that assignment, I had been on different countries and I received um, orders to go to South America, La Paz, Bolivia. Couldn't speak Spanish, but State Department send you to these courses. They try to train you as much as they can when you're going out to different places. So I went back to Washington and I took Spanish, a Spanish introductory course to Spanish, even though I didn't need Spanish um, to do my job, but it was good to have the basis. So I did that for a few months, and then in June of 1992, I arrived in La Paz, Bolivia, uh,
Can
and
I
it was
ask you,
cold.
excuse me, can I ask you to go back because you said something that perhaps those who are watching this recording would ask, how is it that you're going to a Spanish-speaking country? Of course, there are indigenous languages spoken there as well, but that you didn't need Spanish to do your job. Can you unpack that for us at all?
Yes, because I was going as the regional security officer's secretary. I would not have been coming in contact with officers, Bolivian officials, where I would need to be able to carry on conversations in Spanish. And there we had, for myself, there was a Spanish speaking secretary. So she helped me to interpret people when I could not correspond with them in a coherent way. Uh, but normally, the secretaries did not have to have a knowledge of the language at
I,
that time. I don't know what it is now.
right. When I was in the service, I recall that they had language designated positions where you were required to score at a certain level. So I think what you got was the fast course, the one that
Yes,
covers the basics.
yes,
My name is and where can I eat, those kinds of things, the survival skills.
yes.
They threw you into the deep end, and here you are.
I know. And
Well
and
done.
as they said, I survived those 2 years there without it. It was interesting in Bolivia because they didn't see blacks. We were a novelty in a sense. So when a Bolivian would see a black individual, they would really stare at you. Uh, and the saying was that if you pinch the black person, you will get good luck. So I told my colleagues, I said, well, I'm going to go and stand on the corner and have someone to pinch me and charge them so many dollars
Mm.
to 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 just see what it feels like. And I was the only Black American woman in the embassy. I didn't have any problems because I am the type of person, as long as you treat me right, I can treat you right. And we had a good group of secretaries. We did, we really, really did. And matter of fact, I'm still friends to some of them. And that was in 92.
Could I ask, what now were the differences between working in the political office versus working for the regional security office?
There was a great difference because security, every American who came in who was working would be working in the country, whether they were working in the embassy or working with another company. They had to come through the security office to get their documentations, to present their documentations, and to get their badges. So that was a difference there that we had to give them. At the time, we were having a new embassy. A new embassy was being built, so there were a group of guys who came in to work as security in the building, the new embassy. So they all came in, and then we all got to be friends because I had to process them in. So that was processing the Americans and also the Bolivians. If they were working going to be working in the embassy, they still had to come through security in order to get their badges.
And the badge is essential in order to access the building.
Right. Mm-hmm. There were certain badges that different individuals had. I had a top secret clearance. Most of the foreign service nationals just had regular clearances. So there were certain locations in the embassy where they were not allowed to go without being escorted. Uh, with that with the badge that they had.
I'd like to stray just a little to ask another question
Okay.
because it seems to me there are certain posts that are popular and there are a lot of official visitors. And I'm just curious whether either Lagos or La Paz, your first two assignments, whether you had lots of official visitors or not.
And I want to think that there were more in Nigeria
Mhm,
than there were in Bolivia.
mhm,
If my recollection go back way back, I
mhm.
think that there were more in Nigeria because we had you would have congressional delegations to come.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and as a United States employee for the Department of State, we want to be involved in a lot of things. So they would send delegations out. I'm trying to recall, it was something that was going on in Nigeria. Uh, and my supervisor at the time was not Campbell, was a new guy who would come in, David Quaper. He was out somewhere in another city, and they wanted him to come in because of some type of disturbance that was going on. But he did not come in. The state said come back to Lagos, but he did not return to my recollection right away, because wherever he had gone and whatever he was doing, as far as meeting with Nigerian officials, he felt like he needed to complete that assignment where he was. While if I go back to Nigeria, while I was in Nigeria, there was an attempted coup, and that was frightening because I had heard about coups, but I said, "Oh my gosh!" And I didn't know that it was a coup taking place. That's just how uh, uninformed I was until the next day. But that night, I heard all of this loud noise, and I thought that it was thundering, but I never saw the lightning. And I said, "That's weird. I'm hearing thunder, but I don't see the lightning." Well, the next morning, a friend called, and I had his radio. I don't know if you remember, they used to give us these radios that we had a call sign, and he had taken me shopping that Saturday, and I had his radio. I had put it in my bag, and he forgot to get it when he had taken me back to my residence. So he called and he said, "Do you have my radio?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "What time are you picking me up to take me to church?" And he said, "We're not going anywhere today." I said, "What you mean we're not going anywhere?" He said, "There was a, a coup last night." And I said, "What? Did anybody get killed? Is the president okay?" And he said, "No, I think a soldier did get killed, but the president was okay." And he said, "Why didn't you have on your radio?" Well, I didn't know how to work the radio, so I did not. I told him, I said, "Johnny, I don't know how to work this radio." So he said, "Okay, when I come by to get mine, I'll show you how to work the radio, because you need to keep it on at all times, because this is your lifeline." And I said, "Okay." And from that day on, I kept my radio on. But
Just out of curiosity, what was your call sign or your favorite call signs?
I want to think that I want to say Princess. Princess was where I got the name when I got to Nigeria. I hadn't been there long, and got I named myself Princess, because the ladies in the snack bar would tease me all the time. And I told them, I said, "Well, everybody likes to have a title. So my title is going to be Princess, because God is my father and I am his daughter. So if he is king, that means that I am a princess." And they just laugh. And from that day on, a lot of people will call me, "Hey, Princess Marva, Princess M." So that's where Princess came in, because people like titles. So I gave myself a title, but I was giving myself the title because God was my father, is my father. And so that was back to Nigeria, how those things did happen. And
So, what were some of your other Foreign Service assignments, both stateside and internationally?
Okay, after Bolivia, I went back to the continent. I went back to Praga,
Say that
and
again.
I
I'm
went
sorry.
to Accra, Ghana.
Thank you.
Went to Ghana, and there I worked for the deputy chief of mission. I stayed there for 3 years. I extended, and I stayed there for 3 years. And after Ghana, I returned back to the department. I worked in the department in two different areas, but the one department that I really enjoyed, I was a press officer, and that was quite interesting position. I was the duty press officer when the bombings in Kenya and Tanzania took place. So that was in a very exciting time during that tour because the comm center contacted me first since I was the duty person, and I did. Then I had to contact my supervisor and the other employees to tell them to report to work early. Um, After that assignment,
Wait, before you go on, what were some of the things that were happening? I remember I was in Pretoria at the time, and because of the way things work at an embassy, the ambassador was out of country. The DCM, Deputy Chief of Mission, who was serving as charge, was at a meeting, as was my boss, the economic counselor. I was the ranking officer at that embassy at that time, right? I'm not talking about other agencies and all of that. So the communications came to me. So I'm just curious what you can, in an unclassified environment, discuss.
well, being a press officer was the daily press briefings that we had. We would go in the mornings and go peruse all of the newspapers, and we would pick out certain um, subjects or certain things that had been written because, and we would prepare them as the press briefing information. We would meet in the mornings and go over what we think the news people in the press briefing would ask us so that the press oh god, what was it, the press, the spokesman would be well versed and he could answer the questions because the press officers have prepared the briefing book for him to take to the press briefings. And that was one of the jobs that I did as a press officer. I learned more because I was not one who liked to read the newspaper, but I learned more reading newspapers than in that job than I didn't even know some of the things that went on. But I was glad to get that knowledge of having to read and help to prepare the books for the spokesperson.
And you read newspapers from all over the world, I take it.
Right. We had them, they would come in every morning. We would have the daily papers and we would have to go through them and read. And a funny thing that happened about the one of the articles that I had, Madam Secretary Albright was going to Mali. I think she was going to Mali. And I had pulled down an article about um, Timbuktu. So my fellow press officers, they laughed at me. They said, "Why would you pull out something? She not gonna know anything about no Timbuktu. Madam Secretary is not going to know Timbuktu." But she did. And I say, "See, you all talked about me, but Timbuktu, she did. I don't know if she went there, but anyway, something about Timbuktu came up when she was over in Mali. So I said, okay, go girl, go."
You just never know.
I know, I know. So after the press office job, I a friend of mine had called me and asked me, did I want to go back out? And I had said no, I wasn't going back out overseas. So she gave me this sob story about she had this ambassador who was looking for a secretary, and she thought I would be a good match. And Marva, please, please, Marva. And I said, I don't plan to go back. I don't know if I want to go back overseas. So I said, well, let me meet him. She said, well, will you meet him? Because he was hadn't been sworn in yet, but he had gone to her because she would look for certain people because of her position. I don't know if you knew. Did you know Janice Clements?
May she rest in perfect peace. Yes.
Right. Yes.
She was
Okay.
our continuity counselor at the Department of State.
Oh, okay. Yes. Janice was the one who we were friends because we had worked together years ago. So I met Ambassador Johnson, at least Ambassador designated at the time because he hadn't been sworn in. And we talked. We had a good conversation down in the Foreign Service Lounge. And I accepted the position to go out to be his secretary. At that time, they started calling us office manager specialists, but the pay was still the same. It didn't matter to me whether I was an OMS secretary because the work didn't change and the pay didn't change. But anyway, I did, and I went out to work for him in Swaziland, and I am so happy that I did because Swaziland ended up being one of I think really my favorite places. It was just such a beautiful country. It was small, but it was beautiful. And the embassy was very small. If you were in Pretoria, you say you were in Pretoria, right? Did you
Yes.
ever go over to Swaziland?
No, I traveled extensively, but Lesotho and Swaziland were the two that I didn't see.
Oh, okay, okay. No, it was a great assignment. I truly, truly enjoyed being in Swaziland. Um, I met a lot of people, and in Swaziland, that's when I got a taste of South Africa because I was always going over to Johannesburg, and I had met a friend there who had a condo in Johannesburg. And when she would go over and she said, "You want to ride for the weekend?" Yes, I'll go. So I, I got to love Johannesburg. And then we would go to other little places in Nelspruit and Maputo, Mozambique. So after I left Swaziland, I returned to the department and I worked for not even a good year before I retired. And before I retired, I had signed up to become a WAE
When actually
when
employed.
actually employed. And now they have a new name for it. I can't.
Reemployed annuitant,
Okay,
REA.
okay. I couldn't remember what it was, but I saw something. I said, "Oh, they don't change my title." but I worked. I signed up for them. I retired in November 2002. In March of 2003, I was in Uganda for a few months. And then I left Uganda and I went to Maputo for a few months. And the other countries that I did WAE work was I went to Lomé, I went to Banjul, the Gambia, I went to Niger, Niamey, and Malaba, Equatorial Guinea. Uh, I went to Abuja,
Which is
and
where
I
we
went
first met.
right, and I went back. I went to Juba too, Juba, South Sudan. They had just gotten their independence, and the embassy. We were opening up an embassy there. Um, so I went there and worked some months, and then I went back to Accra, Ghana. Matter of fact, Accra, Ghana was my last WAE assignment.
You decided not to pursue that opportunity anymore?
I know I things was changing so much. I think they security was out of the world, which I knew that we needed it, but it was just that I was getting older and I said, I don't know if I want to go through all of this. So I stopped. I went on and told my WAE, what was her name? Oh, what was her title? But anyway, I let her know that she could take my name off. I wasn't going out anymore. And she was just so disappointed. She said, no, because people were requesting me. And she said, oh, you're one of my best. And I said, yeah, I said, but Chris, I'm tired. I said, I am tired. So when I stopped doing that, then I started doing taking people over to South Africa on tours.
Wonderful.
So I've taken 3 groups to South Africa, and I would go back to Swaziland every time. I made sure that the tour we ended up in Swaziland, so I could show them the beauty of Swaziland, and to meet with some of the embassy employees who I had kept in contact.
That is wonderful. You've had a rich and full life, but what I find interesting is most of your career was spent in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes,
And the Department of State tells Foreign Service personnel you have to be worldwide available, including Washington.
yes.
But as I listened to you, Marva, I thought about something we talk about in the State Department, corridor reputation. When people start asking for you, it's because you have a stellar corridor reputation. And I commend you because you had it when you were active duty and you had it when you were retired and people asked for you to return and to serve with them.
Well, thank you. They did, and I enjoyed it. I did. It was a career that was fulfilling because I never would have thought that this little black girl from the sticks in North Carolina who went to jail demonstrating and not knowing much about the world would end up actually seeing the world. And I thank God all the time. I do. I really, really do. And to come full circle, where I live near here in New Bern is on the spot where I was born.
Wow.
I'm back. I had a house put on the spot where I was born on the
Amazing.
location. So I have gone full circle.
Indeed. Well, let me ask you this as we're rounding up our time together. I would expect that in years hence, people will take a look at this recording and we want to hear what you have to say about pursuing a Foreign Service career, some of the opportunities and challenges. So if you'd like to make any kind of closing statement and address those things, please do.
Okay. I would encourage, and I have tried to encourage um, people, especially blacks, to look into a career in the Foreign Service because there are so many opportunities there that you may not be afforded in other careers. So, where you can travel, you can get to meet different cultures, you can find out the everything about an embassy because some people don't even know what an embassy is. Some people have never been to an embassy. You may have heard the title ambassador, but and then they said, well, what does an ambassador do? Or what are the things that really go on inside of an embassy? And this is a good way to find out because I didn't know a lot. I learned a lot, and I'm thankful that I was able to have that education and as a career. And I just encourage people. Sometimes we have to come out of our comfort zone. Most, and I don't know now because I'm not back there, so I don't know what the ratio of blacks, women, or men are now in the Foreign Service. But at the time that I was there, I was wondering why more people didn't come. But then I looked back and I thought about a lot of blacks. They did not want to leave their country. They did not want to leave their environment because they were skeptical. Some were afraid, and you cannot go by what you have heard, even what you have read. To me, you have to see it for yourself. And once you experience it for yourself, then you can make your decisions. Well, okay, now I see it. Well, somebody told me so and so and so and so. And the reason I say that because people will tell you things who have never even visited a place. When I was going to Bolivia, someone told me, say, well, in Bolivia, when you get off the airplane, you're gonna faint because of the altitude. And I asked the person, I said, well, have you ever been to Bolivia? And they said no. But somebody told me this is what happened. Everybody's body is not alike. So when I arrived in Bolivia and I got off the plane, I was walking like I was on eggshells because I didn't want to fall out and hurt myself because this is what I had been told that with the altitude, I was just going to pass out. So I tell people, do your own research. It doesn't hurt to do your research and make sure you get accurate research, do accurate information because there's so much false information out there. And what will work for me may not really work for you. So, but take that leap of faith. I took it. And my granddaughter, my youngest granddaughter, is a junior at A&T University. She said when she was getting ready to go to college, Grandma, I'm gonna major in political science. Yeah, political science. I said, great. She said, because I want to be an ambassador. I said,
Wonderful.
I said, girl, you haven't even got you done set your high standards high, so you didn't pass all these other offices positions. But she was looking at one to be an ambassador. And it was from being around me, hearing me talk about my experiences. But she changed her major and decided that she didn't want to go into political science. So I said, well, okay, then. Well, at least you had that, you thought about it for a moment or two because of the experiences your grandmother has shared with you. So I try to, when I come in the presence of young people, male and female, I try to share my story and let them know that there is another world out there.
Thank
Did
you
that answer
so.
you?
Yes, thank you so very much. We appreciate the time you've taken out to share your stories with us.
Okay, you're quite welcome.